Good morning, everyone. I was reminded when I was in London last year, I went to an Aberdeen steakhouse and got a very nice Aberdeen Angus steak. However, all the steaks were sourced from either New Zealand or Australia, and I thought that was quite disappointing. We'll get questions, no doubt, later on. It's my pleasure now to introduce our second speaker, Duncan Morrison. Duncan farms with his wife Claire in Aberdeenshire. He is a monitor farm with Quality Meat Scotland and runs 260 suckler cows, mostly Aberdeen Angus. He has studied grazing systems in New Zealand, and Duncan could have talked to us today about a number of things: growing winter crops for feeding outwintered cows. He could have talked to us about rotational grazing of young bulls, but today he's going to talk about using genetics to drive performance in a forage-based system. Duncan.
Okay, thanks very much for the invite to come across here to Northern Ireland. It's been a wee while since I've been across here. Bit of a ropey journey across here, so I'm not sure if I'm actually going to get home, but yeah, I'm sure we'll have a bit of crack if I end up having to stay the night. Just going to tell you a wee bit about ourselves before we make a start. I know that the things I've learned over the last few years of farming, that the farming industry is so diverse. There's so much different systems, different landscapes, different kinds of weather, different types of people. So I'm not sure how well my system will apply to what you guys do over here. You've got different weather and different sort of systems, but all I can do is speak about myself and what we do. So I'm a fourth generation farmer, but I've got a first generation business. So I sort of wear two different hats when it comes to how our business has developed over the last few years. Bit of a blank canvas, really, but I've still got the family farm behind me. So I built a business since 2016, and it's been built sort of the way I wanted it to be. This year we'll bull about 260 spring calve and suckler cows. Our business has grown quite a lot in the last 10 years. I started out with 49 cows that I bought on finance using our local market, and we've just expanded from there. We run Aberdeen Angus cows and Stabiliser. We've got pedigree breeds of both breeds, and we've recently started a ewe flock as well. We wear a couple of hats as well, just in terms of how we market our stock. We self-store cattle depending on cash flow and the conditions at the time. We finish stock, we'll finish steers, heifers, and bulls as well. And with our pedigree stock, we'll sell breeding heifers and breeding bulls as well. We are QMS monitor farm, and we're just coming into our last year of that, which has been a great experience to push our boundaries a wee bit. It keeps us on our toes, and you've got hundreds of farmers coming and pointing holes in what you do. So I'm used to flack. I've got thick skin, so if there's anything you think's wrong, just shout it out and I'll bat it away. We're in a couple of discussion groups, and I'm in a Farmax group as well. I'm actually silver certified for Farmax to teach it to a certain extent. So grazing and livestock, those two things are really important to me, and that's sort of how our business has just developed. So as I said, started the business in 2016. Before that, I was a farm manager. I got made redundant. I had no savings really, and I just had a bit of a dream really. That's all I had. So managed to get some funding from the bank and the local livestock market, who helped me buy some cows. And yeah, the rest is history. But I just returned from New Zealand on a scholarship that I managed to get through the Aberdeen Angus Society. And I spent a lot of time over there looking at their suckler herds. And it's very different to this side of the world, where the suckler cow is the lowest of the low in terms of the terms of priorities. Dairy is obviously number one, and sheep's probably after that, and the suckler cows treated like, you know, the lowest of the low. So they're very much a low input system. They're outwintered and they're outside all year round on really tough terrain. And these guys were running a lot of stock with very little staff. And it just started to get the cogs turning in my mind that really there was probably an opportunity back home to look at what they were doing, and in other countries too, just strip a lot of the labour out, and see how we could make the job profitable. So back in 2016, this was long before the recent beef price increases, it wasn't looking particularly great. There was 1,000 cows leaving our local parish in the spring of 2016, and here was I going to the bank with a business plan, looking to borrow money to buy suckler cows. So it wasn't exactly a very exciting proposal, I'm sure, for the bank. So I really had to, get my thinking cap on and work out how I could, what I was going to bring to the table. What was I going to do different from everyone else, people that were selling the cows up and giving up. So yeah, use what I learned to do that. So part of my business plan was looking at the beef prices around the world, just where we sat in the hierarchy, if you like, and I don't want to step on Philip's toes for all the statistics, so mine might not be right. He's probably much more accurate than me. But this is kind of updated, but the same things still apply now as it did back then, that the beef price in the UK is just about the highest in the world, more or less, give or take. And there's other countries that are making a far better job than us of having a sustainable, profitable system. Plenty of countries, New Zealand, for example, that they're not subsidised, they're on their own in the world. They're way in the bottom corner of the globe, and they're still managing to export the beef all the way around. And when you look at the type of farms and the systems that they've got, they're not too far from us. Very much grass-based. They speak the same language and they've got the same stock. So why can they do it but we can't? So I think a lot of it's about the system. So just a little bit of an exercise here I want to go through. The HDB in England did a farm bench study. I'm using this study just because it's the most recent. It was just done at the end of last year, but there's heaps more like it. QMS in Scotland did plenty recently, and I'm sure there might be the same kind of studies here. But just an example, just to go through some of the statistics and the suckler herds. The top 25% of herds, in terms of profitability, they calve their heifers around about 24 months, but the bottom 25% calved at 29 months. Now this might be a bit of a contentious issue today. We outwinter most of our cows, but with the weather today, that doesn't look particularly smart. But generally speaking, it works for us. But the statistic there, the bottom 25% in a cow housing period, 4 weeks longer than the top 25%. And I know there are certain situations where that's not possible, and whether it's land type or weather or whatever else, but you can't help but admit that it's a significant factor in costs. In terms of the output and the productivity, the top 25% of herds, they wean 3% more of their live weight at 200 days versus the average. And not only that, they fed 30 kilograms less calf creep on average as well. So I think when you join those two things together, that generally points to a slightly smaller cow and a much better use of their grazing. In terms of fertility, which is probably the number one contributing factor to fertility in a suckler herd, the top 15% of performers, they stood out compared to the rest. In each of the top performing herds, 75% of cows calved within the first 6 weeks. So they had a really tight calving period. They were, getting it done and dusted and moving on to the next job. Whereas in the remaining 85%, some of them were dragging on forever and ever. So that's possibly pointing to a lack of discipline, a lack of a proper system, but also maybe some health issues, whether it's fertility, bull issues, Yeah, so there's various things that could be in there, but the most profitable herds have the tightest calving. In terms of labour, another big factor, it speaks for itself that the farms with the lowest labour costs tended to be more profitable. It's fairly simple, but it's kind of hard to do in practice sometimes. So it just makes me think that maybe there is still room for improvement. And when you're looking at systems in other parts of the world where they're not subsidised, they're not getting the same beef price that we are, but they're still making profit. But it's probably because they've got to be more on the game when it comes to their systems and their discipline. So just on to the next step of this. So how do you actually apply that? So, these sorts of things, this is the next stage on. We're looking to reduce fixed costs and overheads with the housing. We're breeding the right type of cattle that fit the system. We're improving our grazing management so that we're being more productive with the amount of stock we've got on our per hectare. Fertility, it's number one profit driver. So, it's a lot of that's just down to attention to detail in terms of heat detection if you're using AI. It could be getting the right type of bull, or it could be culling out unproductive cows, or tighten your calving pattern. And when it comes to labour, it's a lot about eliminating problems, really. The next stage on is how do you actually apply that to your breeding? So I'm not going to go through all of that here, but the point of this presentation is how we actually work through the process of where the money is and where do I get it and where do I save some of these costs. So when it comes to housing, things like that, outwintering or whatever it is you want to do, it's about finding the right type of cow, the right cow in the right place. And when you match those two things together, I think your system just seems to work far more in synergy. When it comes to stocking rates and output per hectare, that's a little back of the fag packet calculation there. Think about the cow type. For example, a 900 kilo cow, the same live weight on the same hectares, 20 compared to 27. And as a rule, smaller cows generally wean a higher percentage of their body weight. So if you work that sums through, you've got a £7,000 difference at selling your wean calves. And you can interrogate my figures. That was a bit of a back of the fag packet calculation, but it's just a little hint that there is ways of improving your output, and sometimes just topping the livestock market isn't really the one. It's about producing more per acre or per hectare, and really matching the type of stock you've got to your farm. In terms of fertility, it's setting rules. It's saying, we calve from April to May, or we calve January to March, and if you're out within that period, you're gone. We know how valuable cull cows are. Replace them with a heifer and just get stock that will do the job. In terms of labour, well, that's a big one, and I think that's probably one of the easiest low-hanging fruits to improve. Just get rid of problems, like stop hanging on. Things like foot trimming, why? Just move them on and replace them with someone else. We just don't foot trim, we just cull, that's all we do. So that's kind of how you can apply the statistics to your breeding strategies. So this is kind of what I'm aiming for. Lean and mean business, but quite opposite when it comes to the cows. So I think one of the main things is actually just thinking about the type of farm that you've got and building from there. So for us, we've got a mixture of different land types. We'll go up to about 1,000 feet. We're relatively dry, free draining soil. We don't have a great deal of buildings, and we've got a place that outwintering cows is quite a good idea. We get a lot of snow at times. We've just had about 2 or 3 feet of snow just melt a couple of weeks ago. Can be a challenge, but that starts to determine the type of cow that we've got. A dairy cross Belgian blue is probably not really going to cut it for us. So, the the Scottish saying is the condition would go off like the snow off the back of a dike. So they're not going to stand it. But we can grow good grass, and we do grow good grass. So we need stock that not only can be hardy and look after themselves, but they do need to be very productive when it comes to the grazing season. We'll grow a lot of mixed species swards, a lot of high quality stuff. We're quite on top of things with the rotational grazing, try and do the best that we can. So that's what we've got. So what matches that? So I've got three kind of little concepts that I would like to speak about: the recipe book, the lathe, and the balloon. So the recipe book is, what do you want? What do you think is the ingredients in your cow herd that is gonna make you money? So for me, this is what suits me. Might not suit you. But number one, easy calving. I don't want to be calving cows. They need to be good mothers. Again, that's important. It makes farming fun when you see a cow doing her job and getting up and licking her calf, and that's satisfying to see. So, I pay a lot of attention to that. Fertile, that goes without saying. Longevity is a thing that gets underestimated, I think, because your replacement costs so huge when you're replacing cows constantly. So if you can get cows that are lasting till 10, 11, 12, 14 years old, keep them going and try and keep some Benny heifers out of them as you can, because those cows are running for free almost, as long as they're productive. Structurally sound, it goes back to the feet problems, or the udders and all that sort of stuff. That's really important. And all these things add up. And the thing right at the end is, it's very easy to have these high and mighty dreams of the perfect cow, but she also needs to be productive. So you need to balance the structure and how good a cow she is to what she's actually producing. But when it comes to finances, all these things actually have an impact on your herd and your bottom line. So it all comes back to money. So how do we do what we do? And why do we do what we do? So our herd is performance recorded, but I would say it's performance recorded under selective pressure. So, you'll see herds out there, they'll be performance recorded, and they'll go through all the processes, they'll be recording, weighing, and doing their EBVs and all the rest of it, but the cattle are being stuffed full of food as much as they can go. And that's maybe performance recording under different set of circumstances, but we are performance recording under our circumstances. So they get what they get, and if they perform, they perform, and if they don't, we found them out. So we're applying selective pressure. So like I say, fertility is really important, and it's really highly linked to profitability. So if we run a calving period of 6 to 7 weeks. It's a very short and tight calving period, and without exception, really, if they're not in calf, they go. Another example is quite often you'll hear advice from nutritionists or something like that. If you've got cows out there that are probably in lower body condition when it comes to weaning time, that you should select them out and you should be treating them really nicely and make sure they get back up to condition. Well, I can see the logic, but my logic is you probably need to get rid of them because they probably don't suit your system. Obviously, you've got to make sure that there's no welfare issues. Make sure that everything's healthy. But if a certain type of animal or a breeding line is constantly, lean and struggling to hold condition, she's probably not the right animal for your system. EBVs, it's that they're a really powerful tool. EBVs, they're not for everyone, and we could debate that all night. But I think the most important thing with EBVs is learning how to use them and what the nuances are. We'll go into that a wee bit later on. But as part of the performance recording, we're recording everything at weaning time. We'll be taking body condition scores alongside our mature weights of the cows. We've been doing frame scores as well, because there's an awful difference between a 650 kilo cow that's here, but she's condition score 5, where the one that's up here that's condition score 2, they're two completely different animals. So we're looking for something maybe in between that, that can handle our system. So frame scores is another way of just, it's almost like a 3-dimension. You've got the weight, you've got body condition, and you've got frame. So that's kind of where our herd is at the moment. We average 656 kilos at a condition score 3.5 and a frame score 7. We don't feed any concentrates. We don't grow any arable crops. We're just fully grass and forage crops. So they've got to do their job on what we've got. And generally, the finishing stock that we breed from that system tends to suit that system as well. So the lathe, that was me a few years ago at Woodwork School. The lathe, my idea of the lathe is, if you can picture someone just working a lathe, making a table leg or something, they're just cutting off the little corners. They're not diving in and halving the job. They're taking off the rough edges, and that's kind of what my concept is for selective breeding and culling. You're not going through everything with a fine-tooth comb. You're literally just taking off things that don't quite fit the system, whether it's condition, it's feet structure, it's teats, udders, temperament. You're just taking them out of the equation, and hopefully you're left with something a little bit more uniform and something that suits your system. But I think it's important just to keep on doing it. Just keep on going, keep on going. The lathe keeps on turning, and there's more and more little wee rough edges that you take off. And hopefully you're left with something a bit more like that. So I think suckler cows can be a much easier job than people think. In our part of the world, the sort of thing that you hear the livestock market is that everyone's short of staff. They just can't get people to calve cows anymore. Well, the clue's in the name. Don't get them to calve cows. It's simplify the job, and the job will be much easier. And not only do you need less staff, the staff that you've got will enjoy the job a bit more too. So that's kind of my attitude. Knock off the rough edges and things will be a bit easier. The balloon, so if you can picture a half-inflated birthday balloon, if you squeeze one part of it, it pops out somewhere else. If you squeeze that part, it pops out another part. So all these things, these factors, when it comes to breeding, I think are linked. And you've got to understand that going way too far in one direction will screw up something else. And these things, for example, fertility and growth, calvenies and growth, calvenies and fertility, these sorts of things are all linked. And if you just go relentlessly in one direction, going for growth, going for calvenies, going for, whatever, there's going to be something that falls off somewhere else. So it's all about just realizing that you're just trying to just craft this herd into a perfect shape instead of just, going for it. Just a wee example when it comes to EBVs and how it links to our system and the type of cattle that we're looking for. The bull on the left would be one of the most widely used Angus bulls in the UK in the last 20 years. He's probably not far off 1,000 registered calves on the ground. But he just wouldn't suit us anywhere near it. He's lean, generally lean. He yields like anything in the world. He grows like stink, but his mature cow weight is huge. Those cows might end up near a ton. They're big cows, and they're not, generally bigger calves, not so easy born. The bull on the right is one of our main stock bulls. That's kind of data set that we're looking for. I'm not going fully on data, as I've kind of said, but when we do look at data, we're looking for key things, and it's generally easy calving, a good bit of growth to weaning, because that's kind of a measuring stick to what your output is on farm, just your weaning weights and what your cow's doing. Mature cow weight, we're just not looking for huge cows. Going back to the stocking rate calculation that I went back to earlier on, smaller cows generally do, increase your output if everything else is, if they're producing. Probably the one thing I would point out in the bull that we've got is his scrotal size isn't particularly great. but it's probably his main flaw. Loads of fat, so it doesn't always completely translate to body condition, but it's the best thing that we've got at the moment. So the one on the left isn't an outwintering machine, but the one on the right is. So I'll talk a wee bit just about our system. So we calve all our cows and heifers outside at grass, all in one group from mid-April. We find that that's great for labour cost. I've got one field to check. We don't use calving cameras. We don't use moo calls. Don't use any technology whatsoever. Just go out at first light, go around the field with the quad bike, take a note of who's calved and who hasn't calved. We're tagging twice a day, usually morning and evening, and it's quite simple really. We've got ewes lambing as well and plenty of other things to do, so I don't want to be sitting glued to a calving camera all day. So we'll leave them to get on with it, and if they don't, like I said, they tend to get the first train ticket out of here. We actually feed our cows at night, which something to do with genetics, but I think it's just a handy thing to know that generally that it will lead your cows to calve for the day. It's not foolproof, but I think it's enough of a handy thing to know to make it worthwhile. Because we just don't really check cows at night. We'll check them probably between 6 in the morning to about 10, 11 o'clock at night. And that's it. So we do quite a lot of data collection as well. We've got calf catchers with our weigh scales. We'll record birth weight, obviously calving ease, the docility of the cow, because again that comes back to labour costs and health and safety as well to us and to the member of staff. All these various things that feed into information when it comes to picking breeding bulls to keep, heifers to keep, cows to cull. All these things are important. So it's quite a simple system, really. During calving time, we'll have our management groups all set up in advance of calving season. So we'll take out the pairs as they calve and stick them into little paddocks, and we'll build our management groups from there. Again, it reduces labour. We're not bringing loads of cows and calves and getting them all mixed and trying to sort out bulling groups. We've got them all pre-organised. When it comes to weaning, it's another big time for data collection. We'll take weaning weights, mature cow weights, body condition scores, frame scores. We'll work out weaning ratios and all the rest of it. So calving time and weaning time are two big times for data collection. When it comes to selecting stock, obviously I've talked a lot about culling, but we need to bring in replacements at some point. So again, they need to meet the criteria, and you can refer back to your records. But we're just trying to bring stock in that meet the recipe. So their parents must have perfect structure, or as close to perfect as possible. They've got to be born on their own. If we're tubing this calf with colostrum because it's not got vigour, we're not going to be keeping that for a heifer or a bull, because it either points to something in itself or its parents as well. Again, we're using EBVs where possible, but just not too much. I think indexes, I don't know how things are here, but I think you've just got to be careful with indexes unless you really know how they're calculated. I think it's quite easy just to follow indexes, but I think they can lead you down not the right path unless you really know how they're calculated. We do finish a bit of stock as well, so just following the same theme as what I've been speaking about. We try and just do it cheap if we can. I think compensatory growth is something that's underutilised generally in the industry. It's maybe not fully understood either, but I think it's not something that's just been invented. It's been on the go for generations. But a lot of feed companies would like to tell you that it's not the best idea. But generally, if you can bring a store animal through the winter quite cheaply on a mainly forage-based diet, they do generally tend to motor pretty quickly. when they hit high quality grass in the spring. So that's our finishing system is. We try and just do that, get them absolutely flying in the spring, and if they need a little bit of concentrates in the autumn, then so be it. But we're trying to do the growth when it's cheap to grow, instead of trying to, work against the kind of natural rules of the game. The type of cow that we produce or we breed, they'll leave us, probably for heifers, they'll be 280 to 330 kilos. With steers, you'll probably be a bit heavier than that, maybe nearer 350. And with bulls, probably there or thereabouts as well, maybe slightly more, depending on how much you push them. So yeah, it's combining a cheap cow with a pretty efficient and pretty productive finishing and growing system. Just to kind of round up a wee things, just when I first started the business, achieving good performance with KPIs was kind of my target, because that was what the problem was that I could see within the industry, that the average herd was miles off with a lot of these things, and there was just so much more money or income left on the table because their cows weren't getting a calf. They were spending too much money on various costs. Cows weren't productive enough, so I've focused really hard on that, and I'm quite proud of what we've achieved over the last few years. There's a lot of things falling by the wayside other than that, but I'm quite proud of what we're doing here. Calving interval on our side of the water, the beef calf schemes changing this year, so that any calf born by a cow who has a calving interval more than 410 days won't be qualifying for the beef calf scheme. So we're quite comfortably going to be fine with that. Production-wise, weaning percentages, I'm quite happy with how we're doing. But I think it does kind of point to the fact that these things are achievable. It's not pie in the sky. You don't need a 50 grand bull to achieve these things. It's just management and applying sort of rules and a structure to your breeding. And I think the industry would be better off as a result of if we could try and get more people to just tighten their structure a little bit more. Just to conclude, my take-home messages are basically a case of matching your farm to your system and matching your system to the cow. Those three criteria, if you get those right, you're not too far off, I don't think. System first, cow second. There's no point trying to shoehorn cows that you like into a system that doesn't suit them. And that's basically it. Understand what the trade-offs are. Nothing is, there's no free lunches. You push in one direction, there'll be something else that will go wrong somewhere else. So it's just about finding the balance with what you're doing. But yeah, that's it. So any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.